with our normal normal process. And do we have any call to the audience?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Or any submitted comments?
Nope.
All right. Then we have our meeting summary, and we'll entertain a motion regarding that.
Brian Keeley, so moved.
I'll second.
All right. I think that was Brian moving and Chuck seconding. Are there any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And do we have any abstentions?
Yes, Justine Hernandez here. I was not at the meeting, so I will abstain.
All right, thank you, Justine. And welcome back. Thank you for being here. All right, let's launch into our meeting, and I'll set it up just quickly for you. There was an ad hoc committee meeting. The Technical Management Committee had their ad hoc working group that several of us from the committee, from the CAC, attended and participated in. I'll give you some feedback on that. And then we have a couple of refinements, I guess, of the options that we've been discussing here for the last couple of meetings at least, and certainly far beyond that for some of the other options. And today I'm going to run through, make sure everyone understands those options, and then ask if we have objections to any of them, and see where we sit as far as consensus goes, or if we're close. We also have potential option X, if you will, as a potential compromise should we get to the point where it feels like we're not going to get a consensus, and but there may be enough common ground for us to get to the finish line. And then at the end of the meeting, hopefully the last hour of the meeting, we'll dive into our policy discussion. And just out of curiosity, is Bruce online? Okay, even better, since I was planning to volunteer him for some work. And now he can't object to that.
Walk out when you're not here.
All right, so the Technical Management Committee ad hoc working group discussed a number of items, particularly having to do with the corridor projects. And what was one of the things they looked at was the spreadsheet that Brian presented to us at our last meeting that included 4 different options, and the committee looked at those. A couple of notes, I guess, that I made included that 5 of the projects that at their previous meeting they had asked us to reconsider that had fallen below the CAC's cut line, if you will, for the projects in our priority ranking list. We did, and by looking at the procedure that Brian presented, and which seemed to have consensus as applicable for the most part here to our committee, those 5 requests for reconsideration, if you will, ended up being included in the list. So those projects did move back up into the proposed list of projects. was also discussed, several of the projects were discussed both for scope and alternate funding, for actual priority, and then finally for the possibility of elimination or substitution as we get down to the end of our list, if you will. So as far as I understand, we don't have a response back on those items yet, but just to remind you, and I see that Director Credio is here, and I don't want to speak wrong here. So in case there is a response available for us now, I could call on him. But is Carmine online? He's not. Okay. We understand that the county and the city both are looking at the Colossal Cave project, as we discussed the last couple of meetings, the possibility of shifting of some of those funds and or rescoping of that project was one that would be discussed separately by the two agencies, and then presumably they would put their heads together and see if there was something they could recommend to us. Sam, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, there's Carmine. Oh, his ears are burning.
Colossal Cave.
Yeah.
Carmine just walked in. House.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, no, I don't have anything to report on that, other than that if you look at our prioritized project list, you'll see that Marianne Cleveland Way from Houghton to the city limits is moved up in priority for us, and that would be the project that we would support over Colossal Cave. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
As we say, and how much is that portion of the project?
That project is estimated at $50 million. That does not reflect the HDR cost estimate exercise, because that project wasn't included in that exercise, and we've not gone back and updated it based on the line item cost estimates.
All right. Carmine, we were just talking about the hang on just a second, Dale. We were just talking about the Colossal Cave, and I understand that you're continuing to discuss it. Do you have any kind of report for us about that?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And yes, we continue to look at Colossal Cave Road and evaluate it. Preliminarily, our relook at it is that the entire corridor from Camino Loma Alta all the way to I-10 is important in that it functions as a whole, and that really if you do a portion of that, you don't get the congestion relief that you otherwise would receive by completing the entire corridor. So at this time, we're not recommending a reducing or breaking up of that project.
Okay. All right. And I guess Sam's comment was that Marion Cleveland would replace Colossal Cave as far as they're concerned in their priorities. So, Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask Sam, where you said you moved it up in its priority, what is its priority now with the city?
Mr. Chair, Dale, thank you for that question. So in our overall prioritized project list that I shared with you the last time we got together, it is our number 22 ranked project overall. If you remember, that is inclusive of all the different elements that we proposed. The total ranking is from 1 to 26, and so we have it ranked number 22 overall.
Okay. Thank you.
And then let's see, there was also a conversation, at least in the previous meeting, about Ina Road with Marana. And there was a point, I don't, is Terry on?
No, but we did have conversations with them as well, similar to Colossal Cave. That's obviously an important regional project, and at this time, there's no official recommendations for any changes.
So that one remains, wherever, we had it, which was somewhere around number 15 or 18, I think. I don't have those numbered, let's see, 15, yeah, 15 or 16, I guess. Okay, additional comments that were received at the meeting included, as was suggested in Brian's presentation, the possibility as you get down to the end of jumping over one of the city's projects, which was Irvington Road, that was, yeah, that'd be good. Thanks. Yeah, so slide down to the black one. And
Got it. Okay.
yeah, so the tan, dark tan, whatever that color might be, would have been, the next project on at least one of the options that we looked at, and the possibility then of instead of throwing that one in, using the next two projects, the ones in blue, would save a total of about $14 million, and as a result, help in balancing the budget, plus get us one or two extra projects. So that was an option that was discussed for a few minutes at least at the meeting. Brian, do you want to add anything to that memory of mine?
Yeah, I think the only thing worth mentioning here is Pima County, that number 6 project, the Drexel project. I didn't catch this when I was making it, but the city has a whole bunch of projects along Drexel Road. So that number 6 Pima County project kind of falls in line with that. And so there's discussion of whether that project needs to move up above the line, kind of for the same reason as if we're doing a corridor to leave one piece out. Probably isn't a good idea. But as far as the Ina Road and Colossal Cave, Marianne Cleveland projects, those are still above the line. So I know we talked about those, but based on the budgeting here, those would be included as well. So the only thing that fell outside of it that I think was worth a note was that number 6 Pima County project, the Drexel Road one.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Just to clarify, the Marianne Cleveland is a new project to us as far as our ranking list. And it would be essentially, in terms of the city's priorities, it would be number 22 of their 26 projects. And it would be instead of, I guess, or above in priority, the Colossal Cave project.
Just a minor clarification. I believe this is a different version of what Brian
Yeah,
had,
it
right?
is.
So
I'm
just want to
sorry.
make sure Brian knew that.
45.
This is a minor revision to what you had, Brian, just for
is
your
4.
information.
Okay, thank you.
4.1.
Yes.
Yeah, this is just a slight modification. It was just, I guess, easier to get up. Sorry. Okay, so other comments that we received during the ad hoc committee's conversations regarded the categoricals and the jurisdictions, for the most part, from my view of it, were supportive of adding some more named projects into the categoricals. As you know, we currently have a couple there that are city projects that have been moved out of the corridor projects and essentially into named projects in active transportation and safety. Those would perhaps be joined by other projects. We know that the city has given us a list of a number of those types of projects that could potentially be a part of what they would suggest being included. We talked about not having all of the, not having too many projects named within that simply because priorities change, and knowing exactly what you're going to need in 10 or 20 years is pretty much impossible for these kinds of safety projects for the most part. So perhaps something is just my thinking that would cover more or less the first 5-year period of the 20-year plan would make sense. And the jurisdictions said that they would be looking into that. I would anticipate that that'll be before, or that they'll come to those conclusions sometime after we submit our proposal, but just know that that's something that would be done at some point to refine the plan. Okay, and then there was some conversation about the transit element as well. And there's this, of course, is where the biggest discrepancy probably between the plan we've been talking about that was presented by our subgroup and that we've been talking about the $691 million proposal for transit and the $510 million of the TMC framework. That being the main difference, the working group suggested that it would be important for us, as I think we've already begun to do, to justify whatever number we come up with. So assuming that we're going to go above 510, if we do, what would be our justification? What would be the use of those funds? And we do have some proposals we've been discussing that show a breakdown for that money. So just an FYI. Carolyn?
Yeah, I just had a question about the Drexel Road seamlessness that Brian brought up. For the city Drexel roads, they're just adding bicycle and pedestrian and actually removing a travel lane to do that in one of these sections around Midvale Park. And then the county's project for Drexel expands to 3 lanes. And this is just not really being that familiar with Drexel Road. I haven't been down there in a while and counting lanes. But so is that truly going to be seamless, or is it going to be going the other way where they're reducing and you're adding lanes, or is it going to all be kind of seamless?
Carolyn, I think that's a great question. You know, that's something that we'll go back and take a look at. I think the other point worth noting with Drexel is it's at the west end of the corridor there. So, I mean, it is a continuation of the corridor, but I think you're right. We need to take a look at what's being proposed on the city projects and then how that lines up with what the county has proposed. And, you know, I think because of just the placement of the county segment at the west end of it warrants us continuing to look and come back and say, you know, modification to that scope that we would recommend.
Okay, so I'm assuming that the city and the county weren't together developing all of this. It was had the same road in mind. Okay.
Yeah, we certainly know that we got a number of Drexel projects, and this is at one end of that corridor. And, you know, as such, from logic anyway, you would think that it has some level of importance or that there's some logic certainly to including it. Additionally, I heard of some conversation about Irvington Road, and that it was regarding the cost estimates. We had seen some document that showed it at, I believe, around 40 million, but we've been dealing with a 63 million. Is that right? Anybody?
Yeah, 63 million.
Yeah, 63,051,000. So if there is a difference in that price that we haven't heard about, whether there was additional funding being sought or found for it, or if there's a difference in that change order or in that cost estimate, it would be helpful for us to know about that now. Do you know about that, Sam?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I was just making a note on that. I believe that when we were looking through our prioritized project list, we may have tweaked the scope on Irvington Road to try to balance the dollar amounts there. So I'll seek some clarity on that and see if I can't give you a confirmation, but that's my guess is what happened to Irvington Road.
Okay.
And I would probably echo that our discussions with you were specific. The 63 matched that particular scope. So there would be project variations. It's not two different numbers for the same project. It's probably two variations. That's a safe way to say it, Sam.
That would be my guess, but I'll confirm.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it in my notes.
Yeah, and that certainly would have some impact on, I'm going to put that back up for just a second. That would have some impact on the conversation I just shared with you about perhaps substituting the county and city sixth priority projects for this one, which was Tucson's fifth priority. So we'll hold that in advance. We don't know where the line's going to be for sure, and we'll be talking about that. So Farhad, anything else from the working group or Brian or any of the other committee members who were present that I may have missed?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to, and I'd like to hear from Brian as well. I thought it was a good conversation. I think everybody was open to the concept of proposal that was brought forward by Brian, and so it's really that trade-off. The memo that you have in your packet kind of expands a little bit on that. And I believe, based on my conversation with Brian before and after the meeting, that is what he was focusing on, that let's start getting to a compromise proposal, and there's a trade-off, a give and take approach. And if we want to balance this out, I believe at least the ad hoc working group members recognize that was the objective of the proposal, and you can take it to whatever variation you like. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll ask Brian to add anything he likes to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Farhad. I agree. I did not, all the different jurisdictions seemed open to this concept, not really, I didn't pick up on negativity surrounding it at all. One thing I think is important to note, and I think we'll discuss it today, is the trade really was removing Tucson roadway projects in order to meet their number one goal, which is transit. So we wanted to identify, because Tucson was giving up the projects, that surplus money that is created by giving up those projects would not be put into the transit bucket as a whole, where it then gets differentiated out. That it was important that that money would be earmarked for the city of Tucson for transit, on top of what they get out of the transit bucket, if you will, if that makes sense.
Brian, but what you did was find the trade-off was to get $70 million, not for transit generally, but particularly just to fund the HCT project.
That was what, yes, that was the goal. The HCT, well, I'll just leave it at that was a conversation that, a comment that came up during the HCT was for Tucson, but I think that is a matter that'll be probably discussed today. Is that right, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think that's right. The way that I'm kind of looking at it right now, until we get to that specific conversation of the level of funding for transit and for corridors, is to consider that essentially is Tucson transit money, and where it fits in their priorities would kind of feed into that conversation.
Yeah, so I think just the point was to note that I think Tucson, if I'm correct, it's 55% of the overall transit bucket money. And so the point, if I'm recalling it correctly from the city of Tucson, was taking away their road projects. If we put that money just into the transit bucket as a whole, then Oro Valley would get a percentage of that money, Marana would get a percentage, Pima County would get a percentage, and yet it was Tucson projects that were taken away to create that funding. So the city of Tucson, as I recall, was looking to, since this was a trade-off to meet their number one priority, which was transit, that somehow that money would be allocated to the city. So that was the request, as I recall it. And like I said, I think there'll be more discussion on it, but that's just the feedback from the meeting.
Very good, thanks. Okay, I want to quickly go over Brian so that we can understand it, and kind of this 4.1 that I've
I thought we were gonna pull up Brian's, you want 4.1 or Brian's? There's a variation.
we're going to look at at Brian's, yeah.
Brian, so that's different. Pull that up.
No, I've got it. So Brian's 4 options or 4.1?
No, the one that's in the packet, let's pull that up.
Yeah.
We got it.
We go.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I guess my question for the group is, do we want to go over all 4 options again? Seemed like we were focusing on option 4 of Brian's that did include the 70 million. So it just the interest of time, I don't know if we need to go over 1, 2, and 3 again, unless people think we do.
No, I only wanted to go over 4 at this point.
Okay.
And then we can look at some of the variations of that. Okay. So here we have, I'm gonna scroll up to the,
So you've got, okay.
scroll up to the line. And that's not super readable, but that's at 1.11 billion. Is that what I'm reading there at the right at the line?
This is on
Yeah.
option 1, though. Is that where we want to be?
No, should be option 3.
Option,
Sorry, 4.
option 4. Yeah.
The other 4.
Okay, there
We
you go.
are.
That's option 4.
There we go. All right, so this shows 999 million at the break point. If you recall, the next 3 projects were the ones that we've been talking about, perhaps substituting the second and third in case instead of the 4th, if we were to go further in that line. But Crystal, if you could scroll further down to the summary. Yeah, that was it. It just it went tiny. All right. And so here we have funding of 1.12 billion with the intention of creating enough space or a large enough surplus that a high capacity transit project, or as we were saying, Tucson Transit bucket could be created. And from this, we can see that the surplus at 120.7 million, if I can read that, is available. And then the surplus after that transit money is moved over to the other bucket of 70 million into transit, would leave another surplus of 50 million still from the black line above. So I'm gonna go back to the black line for a sec. So the next three projects, as I said, number 2 and 3 of the next three total close to 50 million, and essentially zeroes out that exercise. So, okay, now back up to the summary. See if you can make it go small again. Oh, small for me, but not bad. Okay, and so from this, the total number of projects is, I believe, 22. Let's see, we have 10, 11, 16, 21, and then we can get 2 more projects, so 23 projects from that. And you can see that the total amount for transit then is the 510 shown there, plus the 70, which would be a total of 580 million for transit. All right, any questions or clarifications?
Tom, I can't, I just checked with staff. So on Drexel, we'd be matching cross section. So while we're expanding to 3 lanes, the city is going down to three lanes. So it would be a consistent cross section throughout that corridor.
Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. All right, any comments about this? I'd kind of like to find out if we have objections to this proposal so that we can start to gauge where we are as a committee. Jamie.
Yeah, on that last question, so we're saying that project, the Drexel project, the city's gonna reduce the lanes and then suddenly we're gonna widen them to 3 lanes? How does that really fit in the overall picture?
They'll be reducing to 3 lanes, and the county will match that and continue further west from that endpoint of the cities.
Oh, they're reducing to 3 lanes?
City is.
The city is, yeah, as a
I thought they were
transition
reducing to
out.
2 lanes. It's currently 3 lanes.
So there are segments, and Sam can verify this, but what I've been told is that there are as many as 5 lanes in the city on Drexel, and they're reducing down to 3, going from 2 lanes to 3 lanes to match the cross section.
Oh, okay, so it'll be continuous like 3 lanes, the whole segment. Okay, thank you.
Good. All right. Comments about this proposal here?
I guess, are you making no suggestions of where this 50 million extra goes to the other categorical? Is that what you're saying? And we're just being asked if we.
Well, no, the proposal that, let me, Rick, bring that up for a second.
Got it. Hey, Crystal, I'll take over real quick.
No. Bringing Liz. All right, so some of the proposals we'll be talking about include these first 2 here, which I'm sorry, the TMC framework, which we all know, the 1.12 billion in corridors, 510 in transit, et cetera. This 4.1 has our corridors at 1.048 billion. Still, transit takes the 70 million added on to be 580, leaves the others where they are, and maintains a contingency fund. So that's what I'm talking about here, is this project. So how exactly we get to the 1.05 billion is kind of still up in the air, but the point that I'm getting at is this is the proposal that we've been looking at, this 4.1. So see, Jamie, your hand's still up. I don't know if you've got more you want to say.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at this now, I'm 100% in support of this proposal. I think it's balanced. I think it factors in the needs of all the different jurisdictions, their stated needs. I think it does what the RTA board wants us to do, make sure we fund the deferred projects and have the contingency. It just seems to make sense. We do increase in a lot of areas like transit, you know, and we've done what we said we were going to do. So, I mean, if you're asking for a vote, I would say yes right now. I think this one would sell to the folks.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a vote, but I do appreciate comments about it, particularly any that might, you know, object to it or have problems with it. Dale?
I agree with Jamie, but I just want to make sure of one point that I think I've got it right, but my understanding is that additional 70 million in transit would be all for the city of Tucson. Whether they want it with the high capacity or whether they use it for their other changes. Is that correct? Is that what we're saying?
That was the intention that I heard from Brian, that because the creation of that 70 million additional projects was at the expense of city lower priority jobs, then it felt like that diverted money should move over into the city's priorities within the transit area.
I agree with it as long as that's.
Yeah, the only problem with that is that transit isn't going to show up on a ballot as specific to the city or someone else. It's going to list all of the priorities for the work to be done and how much to be funded there. And of course, for the most part, the first 4 or 5 of those items are 90 to 100% City of Tucson responsibilities through Suntran and its various legs. So I don't quite know the answer to what you're suggesting as far as how you present it or how it gets into the ballot. But the point is that it takes the total amount to 580 million.
Right.
If I may, it might be helpful to add, and the conversation took place at the working group as well. So the 510 is sufficient to continue to meet current transit needs, enhancements RTA is providing currently. So anything above the 510 in this scenario would be dedicated to Tucson's enhancements.
I think now I'm confused. The $70 million is that for high capacity transit? Or are we saying that it's could be used for various different projects?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll take another stab at it. So ideally, I think what the chair is trying to do is to define that element for now, and then we can come back and talk about transit in more detail. But based on the information you already have, the 510 is broken down, and then you can come back and decide how you want to break up the 70, but still with the footnote that we would have that set aside for services within Tucson limits.
Because I've always had a problem with the 70 million for that high capacity transit line with the destinations and things like that. I've always had a problem with that. But I'm 99% in favor of the way it's been stated. But I could have a sticking point on that 70 million, so.
Okay. Carolyn,
I would just say, if you're kind of straw polling it, as one of the proponents of the June 26th proposal, this is not getting us, I mean, there was a reason for the 691 from the Long Range Regional Transit Plan, and the needs are great. And this going from 510 to 580, and then not knowing what, you know, the other elements that had sufficient money in them for, I mean, I think we're getting close, but I couldn't support this without getting closer to the 626 framework with because I still see those numbers for all the different categoricals, and the categoricals, particularly safety, this committee has been talking about and harping on since the first day we met, how important that is. And I would want to see, I mean, there's not that much difference in that category, but for safety, another 10 million can go a long way. And then the problem with the transit, because I stand behind the 626 proposal that we presented.
okay, so probably be a good time to move over to the second column here, this alternative proposal, which is what Carolyn just described, the 626 group's proposal. So within that, I've talked to you before that the 1.217 billion proposed funding for corridor projects in that proposal would be made up of 980 million in named corridor projects and 237 million in the deferred projects. So that matches what the group brought to us. And transit at 691, as Carolyn just said, and then safety at 160 million. And you can see just to the left of it, you know, the differences so that you can see where we put some of that money. Active transportation goes up to 102 million, and the environment element is doubled up to 60 million, and administrative remains as proposed in all these proposals that we're talking about. And then finally, one of the key elements of the alternative proposal was the elimination of the contingency bucket, with the logic being that the new proposed or the new cost estimates have healthy contingencies and are upgraded, you know, to where we are. And so therefore this contingency is not as not needed as much as perhaps it may have been prior to that point. Anything else I'm missing here? So would like to hear some conversation about the current proposal that we have. Yay and nay. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, that may be very picky, but I don't understand why there's a difference in deferred projects between 237 and 230 and on the line.
Well, the original, I was just trying to make the math work
Oh,
out.
okay.
The
right.
original proposal was 230 million. We know that since that time, the cost estimates have been redone and it's somewhere in the 237.
I just wanted to make sure it was intentional.
Yeah, good point. I should have mentioned that. I knew somebody would be like me and blow the
Pick
top
at
of their head off with the brain power they were losing figuring it out. Okay, see Brian and then Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be best answered by, I don't know, maybe Farhad. The 626 proposal that Carolyn just brought up, can I get my memory refreshed? Was that based on the half cent or the 6/10 cent recommendation?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you, Brian, again, there's been this confusion, so thanks for asking the question. So there was a proposal based on the breakdown that you see. That proposal was later passed by the CAC based on the additional 1/10 of a cent tax increase. So I believe what the chair is discussing today is to just focus on the proposal before the CAC acted on it, because what was acted on would be fiscally not constrained. So he's just going back to prior to that action, what the proposal was.
Yes, let me further clarify. I just repeat what Farhad said, Brian. This was based on the proposal that was, and the budget. This was exactly the budget that was proposed. This is not about the vote that included the 6/10 or the extra 1/10 of a penny, because the board said they're not ready to do that, at least not at this time. So we're looking at the budget, which was within the 2.34 total. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were looking at numbers based on the half cent sales tax and keeping it constrained within that, since, as you said, the board's not willing at this point to go with that extra money. So thank you for the clarification.
Additional reminder again, so the proposal that actually passed recommended the sales tax increase, and then had that been the case, then you would have had the contingency and you would have had the full 1.12 funding for the corridors. But obviously, as you all know, we are limited to the 2.34 at this point.
Yeah, so one of the objections stated at the time we took the vote was that we were suggesting an amount that was not, that is, we weren't indicating which projects would be built and which would have to be cut. And we had a very large, as everyone remembers, we had a very large deficit between the cost of the 33 projects and the amount of money that would be available under any of the proposals that have come forward. And so not knowing how deep the cuts would be, I think there was at least a few arguments about not approving the plan until we had done that. But this is kind of looking at going down to, this is not the most recent one for
I'm sorry, which one? Okay.
on 5.1. That's okay. So this first one, 5.0, is looking at the couple of yellow lines there, Rick. This takes us down to 579,979,000. So 21,000 available still from the 980 that I talked about. But it makes an assumption that the Colossal Cave Road project would be reduced in scope or budget or phased or whatever down to 75 million. this proposal is based on, again, that change. The other highlighted project there is Ina Road, as we were talking about, which Farhad informed us the town of Marana continues to support that project, and I believe that it's a regionally significant project that should maintain its priority list or its rank for us. And if you go down to the next one, 5.1. Well, hold on there. Just so.
So, Mr. Chair, just, I want to make sure we're all clear. This is the one you provided today with those additional options 5 and 5.1, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it is.
Yeah.
It's just not the final version that I sent to you with the headings.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, what we've got here shows the number of projects, and you can see there would be 22 projects under this proposal. We've gone up to the same spot on 5.2. The only difference on this proposal is that we have restored Colossal Cave Road to 157 million, which is the number that we've been working with up until now. And that cuts the projects off at 976 million. Again, 980 was our target. And this gives a total of 20 projects. So just a reminder, we had 23 or 24 with Brian's. I'm going to switch back to the other one now. Or what? Let's just leave this for a second, just so people can remember kind of where the projects are and how the framework would work if we were to use this one. And again, corridors 980 in the black box to the left. Corridors 980, deferred 237. Safety 160, active 102, environment 60, transit 691, and administration 110. And you notice that there's no contingency. The 100 million for contingency has been distributed among a number of the other elements. Okay.
Or was that 5.0 or 5.1 we were just looking at?
5.1.
And which projects are deleted, just to make it clear?
Sure.
Everything under the
Go
black
a
line,
little
right?
further.
Everything.
Okay.
under-
Everything under the black line.
Really thick black line.
Yeah, everything under there.
Irvington.
So there's 13 projects of our 33 that we wouldn't be able to afford with this one. And that includes Orange Grove and Irvington. We were talking about, as you see, Colossal Cave basically shut the door on the remainder of the projects. So that's that project. I'd like to hear any conversation about this this proposal or this version.
Yeah,
You
Tom,
want to go back to the summary page, the table. Yeah, Carmen.
so I think just conceptually, I'm not supportive of the proposal, taking other of the county's projects and off the list.
And which project was it that
Orange Grove.
Orange Grove Road, which, as I recall, was one of your highest priorities overall?
And then again,
It says number 5, but
if I may add, and this is proposing modifications to Colossal Cave as well, right?
no.
Oh, it didn't. Oh, I thought it
This
did.
takes the full 157 million for Colossal Cave. It does not include Marianne Cleveland again because we haven't built it into this proposal.
Says it is.
Sam, let me ask you a quick question. Are there any other projects that should appear above the line as far as where the city puts priorities that would be different from what we're showing?
All right, could I add something to that? If there is anything that, and I'm trying to do it back and forth right now, but if there's anything above the line that moved down in your priorities as well, in your rework, I don't think there is, but.
Mr. Chair, Carolyn, thank you for that question. No, we have, looks like Drexel are the first 4 projects above the line, and those are consistent with our priorities. Irvington's below the line, which would be the next, followed by Campbell Avenue, and so on and so forth. So it looks like, to answer both your questions, yes, those are our highest priority projects, and no, there are no others that have moved up above those.
Thanks for that. Good, Carolyn.
On that list, it still has Marianne Cleveland Way. Is that not the full budget for the 3 projects?
Where does it have Marianne
In
Cleveland?
the description. I-10, oh, Colossal Cave Road, I-10, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
that's
take
just
that
one
out.
of the
I'm sorry.
limits, yeah.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay, let's see, Ron.
Yeah, I think what I would like to hear is more explanation on the contingencies. I know before everyone thought that 100 million was just related to projects, but I think Farhad had explained that there's other purposes for that 100 million. And I'd like to have that clarified again.
Sure. Thank you, Ron. Good question. Again, as you all recall, when we started this conversation roughly 5 years ago, we discussed that there will be some overlap between the current plan and the next plan. And not knowing what the overlap was at the time, we assumed at least a 1-year overlap. And that's where the 100 came from. So you have $100 million of overlap for that policy decision for the board to make, to decide what to do as we overlap current projects with the next project, with the RTA next projects, in addition to obviously having that additional level of flexibility to make some adjustments throughout the finalization of the plan itself. So I've said this before at the board meeting, and I'll continue to remind everybody that anyone that assumes that we can cut into that $100 million, I think would be putting the whole plan in a position that makes it a lot more rigid. And I would continue to ask that the board needs that flexibility to be able to finalize the plan. So that's the main reason for that contingency.
Yeah, and just a reminder, conversation around this table has centered on, as I said before, the cost estimates having been updated and bringing in additional construction contingency, not systematic type or other contingency. But it also, the entire plan is based on a pessimistic projection of revenues, and I guess the justification for removing it on the part of those who have made these proposals has been that there's adequate contingency built into both those factors, and you know, the rest of the contingency should be available then for taking care of some of the cost estimate changes, particularly that have really cut so deeply into our project list. So
again, Mr. Chair, as a reminder, and I think Jamie touched on it back in July when we had this conversation with the board, they did indicate that they would like to keep that contingency. So that's why I keep bringing it up as well. I think we still need that for the board as they move forward, finalizing the plan.
yeah, understood. Let's see, I have Jamie and then Brian.
Mr. Chair, hey, this is Jamie. So I guess I'm a little bit lost. Is this 5.1, does this represent the middle of the road? Categorical corridor proposal? No, it's just another idea.
Yeah, it's just another idea. I didn't even provide it in the
Okay.
in there, but you understand the logic of it anyway. Kevin?
But if we look at the overall middle of the road, basically, we try to make everybody happy, so we keep essentially the corridor funding whole, but we take out, we match the other, the 626 framework as far as categoricals go, but we do that at the expense of contingency, right? Is that accurate to say that?
If you look at the alternative proposal that's on the screen now,
Yeah.
you essentially get what you're describing, fully fund transit and the other elements by utilizing the contingency money and therefore bring corridors up closer to the TMC framework, still 140 million shy of that.
I guess I'm still opposed to not providing some contingency. I don't know if it has to be 100 million, but I mean, we saw from this RTA one that it kind of affected our credibility where, we have $234 million worth of projects we got to carry forward. And I wasn't part of RTA one, so I don't know if we really budget those things pessimistically or not. And again, 20 years is a long time. A lot of weird stuff happens in the world that causes the prices to go up. And usually they don't go down real quick. So I guess the middle ground proposal with zero contingency. I just don't know how that would work unless we gave them this proposal and the RTA board said, okay, well, to meet that contingency, they have to raise the tax rate. But I mean, that's the only thing. That's my only concern. I just think this has to have some type of contingency to make sure we get everything done. If we came up 237 million short this time, what's to keep us from doing that again next time? So I just think we got to have something there.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it, Jamie. Brian, and then Arlen.
Mr. Chair, a couple things. Does the alternative proposal of 691 for transit, does that include the 70 million we found in that exercise for the city of Tucson, or is that 70 million above and beyond?
No, that's 621 million for operations, I guess, and 70 million for the high capacity transit.
Okay, and then on the proposals, just a couple things. The Colossal Cave project, if I think that needs to be, I don't think we should cut that. If we don't alleviate the problem at the railroad tracks, then we're not really fixing the problem. That's been my stance all along. And I too oppose the county losing the Orange Grove project. That is another cut. And then I will echo, I agree with the contingency. So in my opinion, I lean more towards the 4.1 option.
Thank you. And Arlen.
To get to my unmute. Sorry.
There we go.
I'm playing a little bit of catch up as I was gone for the last couple of meetings out of town. And so I'm trying to absorb all of this because even though I looked at it as I'm hearing it's describing and how we got to whatever, excuse me, it's I'm having trouble keeping track of things. Just a couple of comments. I don't, as I'm hearing this, I looked at the list of projects that are in. Some of them are the same as I would have picked when I picked them. Some are not. Doesn't matter. This is the consensus where we are. But relative to projects, it's a little bit confusing. What I heard from the city was we want Mary Ann Cleveland Way project. This one none of these seem to include that in favor of the Colossal Cave project. The Colossal Cave project is supposed to extend up into Loma Alta. From my standpoint, and I don't know if that is a conflict, but it looks like one. As I'm looking at that, I still think that the middle ground, to me, I think the Colossal Cave, I agree with the last speaker, dealing with the bridging over the railroads or under the railroads or however we're getting through it in a way that deals appropriately with the historic nature of Old Town Vale there is important. And that's a clog now, and it will be a clog in the future unless it's dealt with. When you move to Loma Alta, the Loma Alta part of it, it makes, I understand it, but it makes less sense than dealing with that clog and such. And both of those, both the Loma Alta and the Marianne Cleveland Way, which is most of the time smooth as butter going through there today, and granted will take on more traffic. A lot of that stuff is becoming built out. The primary area for me is that Colossal Cave. So bridging and over to I-10. Secondly, longtime user of Valley Roads, the Orange Grove project is also extraordinarily important, I think. And I think to leave that as a 2-lane road effectively for the next 20, 25 years is a mistake. That's going to continue to take on more traffic as time moves on. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we talk about the contingency as it's either $0 or $100 million. I realize that $100 million is the max, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be something in between. I don't know what the number is, but I'm thinking closer to 0 than to 100, given that all the other changes that have been made. And I think that's something that ought to be considered. And I agree with the additional 70 million into the city for giving up those projects, whichever one this is that does that. The extra that comes out of the middle ground project, a middle ground list for transit that bumps that to 640 would also be okay with me. But I don't know if, getting back to the initial conversation that you all had about the 3 projects, the Irvington, the extension of Drexel, and Campbell, by substituting 2 slightly less expensive one for the one more expensive one, if that saves any money, that allows for more of what I was talking about in the proposal. So those are just thoughts. But I think we're getting closer, as Carolyn says.
Thanks, Arlen. Let me, since you brought it up, let me just lay out what this middle ground option would be. And there's, I have no pride of authorship. I just thought that based on the way our conversations have gone in recent months, that another option to consider maybe something like this, where we essentially maintain the corridor projects by eliminating the contingency. The corridors still are 75 million under what the TMC framework had been. Deferred remains the same. Transit goes from 691 to 640. Safety, active, environment, and administrative all remain as proposed in the alternative proposal.
Environment does not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. Yeah, and environment would be reduced to 45 under this alternative. I think there's obviously an infinite number of those kinds of options, but I don't know whether there's any appetite for an alternative that kind of cuts the baby in half, if you will.
I also, just a point to follow up, and I forgot to mention that the additional 10 million for safety, I think, is also something I would support and is good.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Kevin and then Dale.
Thanks. So I guess I'll, the alternative proposal, column 2 there, I don't think I could support that one just because I think it has too many cuts to the corridor projects, including Orange Grove and the last bit of Drexel. So I could support either option 4.1 or the middle ground. One, I guess I would probably rank them, for me, would be middle ground first, just because I think for the reasons we've already talked about, using pessimistic, having a good amount of contingency built into the projects, that we have a lot of contingency built into the plan. So I'd probably support the middle ground, but I could support either that or option.
Thank you. Dale.
I'd like to comment about a couple of things. One, on the contingency, we need to keep in mind that, and correct me wrong if I'm, correct me, Farhad, if I'm wrong. We also have to keep in mind that they've also changed in the estimates of the amount of tax that would be generated. The proposal for 2006, they took a very much more aggressive stance in that projection, if I remember right. And that's what I'm really asking.
Yeah.
Right. And so they've taken a much more conservative route. So that makes it less likely, but anybody who works with numbers over a period of time knows that that's always a crapshoot, as to what the size the contingency should be. And so, I might be willing to say we cut the contingency in half, but I think it's a real concern. But we need to keep in mind, though, that it's a more conservative estimate. And we had an event that happened in 2008 that caused the revenue to triple. And I know there's been adjustments made for that. So, in what the 2006 project was. My other comment, and this is really a question for the city, and that is, am I hearing you right when you say the 4 projects that are in that list, in that restricted list, are basically, as far as a highway project, you're getting Drexel and nothing more? Is that in accordance with what the council's talking about?
Mr. Chair, Dale, based on what I've seen this afternoon, that's correct. It's basically just Drexel Road and nothing else.
And I know the council took kind of an attitude about, prioritizing transit. And so I think that's consistent with what I was hearing from what the council was taking. Am I correct in saying?
Mr. Chair, Dale, Mayor and Council did prioritize existing transit service holistically in our prioritized project list. However, it's important to note that we still have needs within the safety element, as well as the location-specific projects. Many of our projects are modernization in nature. We do have 1 or 2 widening projects on there. Macaway was one of our few widening projects that had been considered early on. So we do still have needs beyond just Drexel Road. And to be quite candid with you, it's going to be very difficult to sell a plan that only has 1 corridor on it to our mayor and council.
Yeah, I might point out that State Route 210 is within the city limits as well, and it is an important project that the committee is prioritized here. Both of those projects, and it leverages a lot of other funds too from the region. All right, thank you.
Diane, did you? have some-
Yeah, I didn't know if this is appropriate for horse trading. I had a couple of things. One is, did the first RTA have a contingency? Or has RTA next become the contingency? That, so therefore, RTA 3 might be a contingency. But that's just a thought. The other piece is the Sonoran corridor has the 20 million on it. And I don't know if they dove into that. Is that is there any horse trading allowed there that just put the good faith in there? We could put in maybe 5 million and then that's kind of in the noise with the larger numbers, but is that even an option?
Let me touch on both of those. So the first question, the current RTA 2006 used the baseline revenue estimate, and the revenue estimate that was provided was a lot more optimistic. Over time, obviously with the Great Recession and the lagging of that recovery, it took almost 10 years to recover from the 2008 recession. So now when you look at it after the fact, had we used the pessimistic scenario, we would have been right on. So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question was, obviously, did we have a contingency? Yes, but we had a contingency by using other regional funds, state and federal funds. We used almost $300 million of other regional funds as a contingency to the current RTA plan. And I believe from a policy perspective, that's something that I don't believe regional council wants to do again. They want to make sure that those funds are used for other purposes. Therefore, we don't want to rely on state and federal funds as a contingency per se. The second question on Sonoran Corridor. Sonoran Corridor continues to be a priority for all of our members. And that conversation has been ongoing. The state is continuing to focus on that. And I think our contribution of $20 million will really keep that project on the map. And that's been the discussions we've been having with most of our partners.
That's not negotiable.
But that's not to say that if it were reduced, it would go off of the list either. It's kind of an unknown at this point. So do you want to take the chance of, perhaps delaying or losing that leverage, if you will, because 20 million toward a multi-billion-dollar project is obviously not intended to complete a corridor or build a new freeway, but rather to hold our place and to supplement studies and design and right-of-way acquisition, et cetera, that we may use the money for.
And again, if I may, the thought process is that can be used as those leverage for local match, and we can go after federal grants. So we need that local match to be able to get sufficient amount of federal grants to be able to move that project forward. So the lesser that number becomes, the less federal dollars you can bring in.
Okay, Jamie and then Carolyn.
Yeah, so I guess I'm getting back to the transit thing. So SunTrans still provides free bus travel? Is that so this new proposal will continue to be free fares for everyone? Is that correct? Is that what we're proposing?
Yeah, we're not proposing anything within the operation side of how it should be operated, but rather what funds would be used.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, SunTran is operating fare free. That is a policy decision that's been made by the City of Tucson Mayor and Council, and it does not have any bearing on our proposal for existing transit service as part of RTA Next.
But the net effect, if there's no revenue collection for the regional transit system, that means it requires more funding from RTA Next. Is that correct or not? Just
Mr. Chair,
I
Jamie,
understand
currently the IGAs that we're working under with the RTA have been off providing revenue credits. So the City of Tucson's general fund continues to support the absence of fares on the transit system. And the RTA continues its existing investment in transit as part of the 2006 plan.
But if we approve this increase in funding, does that then provide that funding for the region, or does the city of Tucson continue to provide that funding?
I don't understand the question.
Try it again, Jamie.
Let me rephrase it. So right now, the city of Tucson, Sam says the city of Tucson is paying for that free fare subsidy, basically. But if RTA Next is approved, will the city of Tucson still support that level of funding? Or does this proposal basically provide that funding? Or will the RTA Next provide that funding?
Proposal are we talking about? There's 4 on the table.
He's saying, is it supplementing or supplanting?
If we go to the middle ground, or if we, in other words, the ones where we drastically increase the funding, the base from 510 million to the one proposal where we go to 690 and the other proposal where we go to 640, either the alternative or the middle ground. So that's my question. Would the city of Tucson then not have to charge that subsidy if we go to the middle ground? I mean, would people continue to have free bus fares if we go to the middle ground proposal from the funded by the RTA in that case, or will continue to be funded by the city of Tucson if that council continues to fund it?
So, Mr. Chair, Jamie, I don't believe the decision on any of these proposals will affect the mayor and council's decision to offer free fares on the transit system. The SunTran mass transit system is primarily funded by the city of Tucson's general fund. We would, as we have in our proposal, prioritize continuing the existing service that's funded under the RTA, which is actually provided both inside and outside the city limits. And then any additional transit funding beyond that, we would look to both the comprehensive operational analysis as well as a long-range regional transit plan on recommendations for increased service beyond the baseline level that RTA is currently paying for.
All right, thank you.
I think that answers it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it did or not. Are you okay, Jamie? Can I move on?
I was kind of looking for a yes or no, but I think that was I think that was a no, that RTA Next will not be providing free fares for the next 20 years. Is that right, Sam?
Again, Jamie, our proposal was not based on whether or not the transit system charges fares or not. It was based on the continuing the existing transit service that the RTA's funded, plus any additional service based on the recommendations from the COA and the long-range regional transit plan. As I mentioned, RTA is already paying for transit service and being provided a revenue credit. So therefore, the city of Tucson is covering the absence of fares in the transit system. They're not asking for RTA Next to fund fare-free transit in the city of Tucson.
All right, that answers my question. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
I just wanted to address what Diane said, and then just a couple of thoughts. And I would like to move on to the policy considerations. That's what you're doing. But
Trying to do, yep.
the TMC has discussed possibly moving the right-of-way acquisition monies in Sonoran Corridor to 5 million if need be. I mean, that's been a discussion. I think there's been we've known that there's going to have to be some give somewhere. And I believe that it's the feds / state that do the design work for the Sonoran Corridor, since it's a federal and state project.
It would be the state.
Yes.
But again, keep in mind that federal dollars typically require roughly 5.7%. So if you cut it down to 5 million, then you get less federal dollars. If you keep it at $20 million, you get 4 times as much.
Right. And I would say the same about transit. Actually, the more transit you have, the more you can attract federal dollars. too, but to the other issue, I think what you said is that I mean, that's, there's just not that much transit money. I guess we wouldn't get federal. We only can get, I should have said the opposite. We only get local money either through the city of Tucson, a little bit from the other jurisdictions, or RTA money. And there is no federal.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is, we've been talking about these four, and the middle ground, to me, the middle ground is the 5.1, and I'm wondering why the 5.1 isn't up there as one of the options. And then the last thing I wanted to ask Carmine about was Orange Grove. So Orange Grove going west is right now the 4 lanes with bike lanes and sidewalks, and then at La Cholla, it goes to what, 2 lanes?
Petrolia to Oracle is 2 lanes.
Okay, so it would make it match up the rest of Oracle. And does it have bike lanes and sidewalks now?
The 2 lanes? No, it does not.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that would be one thing that we could add into the 5.1, which is kind of what I'm most interested in looking at, is possibly putting the Orange Grove above the black line. And then a middle ground would be some cutting to the alternate proposal here and there to get Orange Grove above the line, because the county has been saying that that's really the priority for them.
Kevin?
Just for clarification, I thought 5.1 held it at 980. I thought the 5.1 was the alternative proposal.
Essentially, but it does hold it at 980.
Okay, so when we're talking about 5.1, we're really talking about the alternative proposal. The 4.1 is the same for both the 4.1 and the middle ground, more or less. I think there was like $2 million difference.
Well, the difference was contingency.
Correct, but we're still talking about the same list of projects for both of those.
4.1.
Yeah, it's the same list.
Included Orange Grove, and I think, well, we're discussing whether it would include the Drexel.
Right.
But there's also the issue of not including Marianne Cleveland Way, but including the Colossal Cave. But not 5.1.
Yeah, 5.1 assumes that Colossal Cave is fully funded.
Yep, right.
4.1 did as well.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but alternative proposal is basically.
4.1, if I may, again, Mr. Chair, I think there seems to be maybe some confusion. So 4.1, all you did was you substituted 2 projects and removed 1, but it's exactly as proposed by Brian previously, right? We can put the list up again if you want the projects, but
yeah, you can see it right there. Yeah.
But not actual projects, which projects?
Yeah, it basically moved that 70 million that had been allowed for up above and moved it to transit.
But the impact to projects was only moving 2 projects around to.
Yeah, 5.1.
There we go. Anyway, I just want to make sure we're all looking at the same thing.
And the alternative proposal is very similar to the 626 proposal.
Yeah, it is.
It's just telling which roads. Yeah, it's just specifying.
Well, it's adding more roads and reducing transit. Yeah. Okay. We have Abby, and then we're going to get into our policy discussion. Go ahead, Abby.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I hopped on a little late, so I might have missed this. And I think it would also just be really helpful to have it all stated in one place again. Can somebody tell me these 4 proposals that have very interesting and different names? Can someone specify when and by whom each one was proposed, just from my notes and anybody else viewing? So the TMC framework, alternative proposal, option 4.1, and middle ground. Who came up with each one and when? And yeah.
Good question. That'll require some research. The TMC framework has been in place for over a year. perhaps two.
I can give you dates. TMC framework recommended by the ad hoc working group in May, adopted by CAC on June 5, adopted by the TMC in July.
Okay, so I'm actually writing this down, Farhad, so can you nail that a little bit more slowly?
Sure. TMC framework recommended by the ad hoc working group in May. Then it was adopted by the full TMC in July. And it was also adopted by CAC in June, early June 5th, I believe.
That was our 9-7 vote.
Exactly.
And who was on the ad hoc working group?
Ad hoc working group is all 9 jurisdictions plus 6 CAC members.
And how did the 6 CAC members get selected?
6 CAC members were selected between the TMC liaisons and the CAC chair.
Thank you. Okay, I got all that. Moving on to the next one.
Alternative proposal was discussed at the June 26th CAC meeting. That is the proposal that was not approved. A different proposal was approved, which was for 0.6 cents. So what you see on the table is a breakdown of the proposal prior to the vote.
And that was the one that was passed, what, like 18-6?
Nope, that is not the one that passed. That's the proposal before the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same budget though.
No, again, I want to be very clear. What you see is the proposal before it was acted on.
Right. The budget that was presented.
This still represents the point.
I'm sorry, say that again.
But-
Well, let's get there. We're trying to catch everybody up.
And
Option 4.1,
we need to, the alternative proposal also includes since then, and I think between Brian and Tom, the chair, Tom McGovern, have a list of priorities in the road projects because that was not in the 626
correct.
budget. So that's the difference there.
Correct. Option 4.1 is a modification to the proposal that was discussed at the last CAC meeting and the ad hoc working group. The initial proposal was offered by Brian at the CAC meeting, and the chair modified that today at today's meeting.
And again, the modifications there were essentially moving the high capacity transit from corridor funding to the transit element. And otherwise maintaining the rest of that TMC framework.
Yeah, and then the middle ground is along the same lines of as what Brian proposed previously, but with the chair's twist to it from today's discussion.
For today's discussion.
Well, presented today at the meeting.
With this thing that's already up here already reflects adjustments from today in it.
These are proposals from the chair that was discussed earlier in the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, again, the middle ground proposal is simply an alternative compromise plan, which when I put it up here, I told you was if this committee feels that a middle ground proposal is more of a gives us a greater opportunity for a consensus, then something like this could be considered. I wanted people to be able to look at it and say, here's where cuts could be put, here's what could be maintained, here's the level that might be acquired. Another of the possibilities here that we didn't talk about, but we talked around was the contingency. And if that were changed to 46 million and corridors to 1 billion, it would still zero out. If you were to, increase or peel back the safety and active transportation and restore environment, you know, you'd also be pretty much breaking even or balancing. So there's a number of tweaks that we could do if what we want to do is a compromise plan. So at our next meeting, please take a close look at all of this information and be prepared. We're going to vote on it next time, and we're going to try to achieve a consensus. If we're unable to reach a consensus, the report back to the board is going to have to catalog what the most popular proposals were and you know, indicate kind of how the committee broke down on that. And I think it's in all of our best interests to be able to provide a consensus plan to the board, as we've you know, set out to do for the last 6 years. Okay.
Do you have, I'm sorry, I keep asking, but one of the middle ground corridor project, does that come with a list, or it just takes out a couple $1 million from, is it the same listed option as option 4.1?
It'd be essentially the same
Just
list. Yeah,
chopping off $2 million.
to make it balance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Although option 4.1 you'll see doesn't balance. If you look at the bottom, it's off by 5 million.
Will you publish 5.14 so we can see that alongside the other stuff we got?
Yeah, since we presented it today, we'll provide that to the committee as well.
And again, for clarification, 5.1 is the same as the alternative proposal.
But without showing us the road.
Yeah,
list,
we'll
right?
include it. Just want to make sure everybody, we might even title it 5.1 for the sake of consistency.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Could we get up our list of policies, please?
Okay, Crystal, I turn it back to you for policy.
All right, very good. Thank you. We have these policies. How far does this get into the commentary? This page 5. We have the other information.
But it's got the Farhad memo afterwards, which gives the comparison, correct? Yep, keep going. I think it's.
Yeah.
This is what you're after. That's side by side.
Yeah, all of it.
There you go. There's the side by
Yeah.
side.
So let's go back and to the first one you just had up, page 8. You see it by 1 through 5 or 8 through 13? Okay. All right. So page 8. Let's quickly go over these to remind you of where we were. My inclination, and I would ask for the support of the group, would be to talk about these and remind everyone where we were, make whatever comments we have, and then not do the wordsmithing at this or the next meeting, but rather leave that to one or more members of our group to make those modifications and report back at our next meeting, so that we can, Farhad, can we do that and include it in the packet?
As long as we're discussing it today, it's summarizing the discussion, yes.
Including any modifications that.
Yeah, again, if the substance of the discussion is the same, then that's fine, yeah.
Okay. All right. So that wordsmithing or modification or even elimination, if that turns out to be the desire of the group, will show up in your packet for sure. And then we'll take it up and hopefully approve it then at our last meeting before we go to the board. All right, so I won't read these for you, but I'll give you or so to read the first one, and we can discuss it. So we've had the arguments about this item and the suggestion of moving up to the baseline forecast, at least to have that contingency in place, up or down. And I don't know if anyone wants to summarize where you think we are as a committee with that. I don't.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Because it's been a while.
Kevin.
What's the difference in the cost or the revenue projection between the conservative and the baseline? Which additional money is talking?
Yeah, it's roughly about $300 million projection between pessimistic to baseline and then baseline to optimistic projection. So $600 million swing.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may again, just
please.
For the benefit of the committee members. So we took this item to the board back in July. The board discussed this extensively, and the direction from the board was to use the pessimistic scenario.
Just a reminder of this feedback that we have at the time.
Are you, I'm sorry, Farhad, are you only responding to the first sentence, or did we already, or the first two sentences?
Well, I think I can expand on that. So yes, pessimistic scenario. Therefore, if the revenues project, if the revenues actually perform better, then the board has the statutory authority to decide how to spend that. If it performs lower than anticipated, we go back to having that contingency to address that. Ultimately, the role of the governing body is to have a balanced budget, to have a balanced plan, a fiscally constrained plan. So I don't think there's that much flexibility, even from the board's perspective. The plan itself has to be fiscally constrained. So those decisions have to be made throughout the life of the plan.
Yeah, from my perspective and understanding that at least some of the discussions that we've had and alternatives that we're looking at call for elimination of or reduction of contingency. I think to pile on to that by changing or recommending to the board that they change the forecast is, I think, a road too far, to use the inappropriate metaphor.
On the second part, the economy outperforming or underperforming, and the purpose of that is just that it goes across the board. Keeping the promise to the voters would include the categorical amounts going up or down evenly across the board. And my understanding is if that was put into the ballot, the voter publication, then it would be part of the plan.
So again, my take on it is that there's no mechanism to do that. You have to have a balanced budget, fiscally constrained. You can't have multiple scenarios. So if it's a fiscally constrained plan, then there's no mechanism to decide what to do with it if the revenues come in higher or lower.
I don't understand that actually, but,
So it's a balanced budget.
right?
And we're making an assumption there's a fixed revenue and there's a fixed expense. So we don't have any mechanism to demonstrate what you do if the revenue comes in higher or lower, because we have to have a target revenue and a target expense.
And so if it does come in higher, what happens to the extra?
Governing body has the full authority to decide where to spend those dollars based on the approved plan. So all the elements that are approved, they still have authority to spend dollars on those elements.
So a current board could make a policy that should revenues fall below, then we'll cut evenly across, or should they be above, we'll increase all the elements per capita, if you will.
Yeah, the board obviously has that
Then the
that
next-
sole power, then a
then the
future
next
board can do
board-
something
Yeah,
different.
the next board, or the board that actually encounters the issue, would be the one that would either accept that policy or create a new one to fit
Exactly.
the situation.
Yeah, again, they're legally obligated to adopt a budget annually, so adoption of that budget gives that board the authority to make those decisions annually.
Right, but could still be in the ballot. I mean, it could become a new policy in the language, and then they deal with that every year if it does come in above, or, I mean, it just doesn't seem to make any difference whether it's a policy that's stated for the voters or a policy that the board decides. I mean, it's less. I don't understand the difference. I don't know how we would find out.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that it could be a policy, just like Tom just explained, it could be a policy, but subject to change by future boards.
Okay, so how does everyone feel about asking the board to look at that as a possible policy to be adopted at some point? I have people online with their hands up. Arlen, Patricia, Eva, and Chris. So let's start with Arlen.
Thanks. Yeah, given what the board said, that it makes the second sentence is effectively moot, and probably ought to be modified, if not changed. The first sentence gives simply an explanation sentence and beginning sentence. The last part of it, however, I think does provide guidance to boards of what the intent was in creating an intent statement. So my suggestion is that if that last part where it says, should the economy outperform or underperform, ... that some slight modification of that be made so that it's reflecting the intent of what we all intended when the plan was developed. And you are correct in that future boards can make changes, but at least they have an intent statement as to how the preference for their decision would be made. They could do something else. That's all.
I'm sorry, Arlen, are you saying that it stays the same, maybe a little bit of change, just talk about the intent, which is basically what these are, the CAC intent, but just the first sentence is just a statement of fact, so the second sentence would be removed and the rest would stay
Correct.
somewhat the same. Okay.
Right, and turn it into more of an intent statement.
Okay. Thanks. I think he said Eva was next. Is that correct? Eva?
Yep, thank you. So I understand we're gonna vote at the next meeting. I'd really like to ask that any of the plans that we're going to be voting on be included in their entirety in the packet beforehand, because it's really hard to evaluate, what these percentages break down to on the fly. I'd like to get everything as it is going to be voted on as close as possible, right? Before the meeting, so we can actually have a better concept of about the differences and the similarities that are on the table. So just putting them in the packet would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Do the best we can, recognizing that the middle ground proposal that I threw out there is certainly not a precise middle ground, and other people will have ideas about where a compromise would be if that's what we want to do. So yeah, we'll do the best we can with that, Eva. And if there are
another plan that was brought, to this meeting with no anticipation. So I'd like to see, everything that we're going to discuss with some anticipation, not just sprung during the meeting at our next meeting in which we're going to vote.
I agree. I certainly hope that's the case, or we won't be able to finish before sundown 2 weeks from now. Because we started at 11. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on Carolyn's questions, because she asked a good one. Is my understanding of the law is that if that statement is included in the plan, then that is a fiscal constraint on the authority that the board has with regard to making changes to the plan. And that, if that's what we want to do to reflect the priorities, and that if the economy outperforms, that the plan and actions related to the spending of the additional dollars that are part of the collections must be consistent with this statement that would be included in the plan approved by the voters. And so it would have teeth with regard to a reflection of and commitment to the will of the voters if they approve the plan, if this language is included in the plan, because that would constrain the ability of the unfettered ability for the board to spend under the statute by including that specific language in the plan that the voters approve.
So Chris, to paraphrase, you believe that a policy enacted by the board before it goes to the public and that were to be, if it were to be included in the ballot language, that it would be sacrosanct. That wouldn't be able to be modified by future boards.
It would be part and parcel of if we sort of include in the plan a certain amount of money associated with a certain categorical or transit, it was approved by the voters, and this language was included in the plan. That's the key thing. This is part of the plan, because it would be the same as any other language included in the plan. We're spending $1 billion on roadways, right? The voters approved that. We can't spend less than $1 billion on roadways unless other contingencies, et cetera. And so my understanding is that if that language, this allocation language of percentages associated with the shares as part of the plan of additional monies, that would bind the spending moving forward, because it would be an expression of the voters as part of the plan, just like any other approved portion of the plan.
Okay, thank you. I understand what you're saying, and I think it also would probably apply to number 2. I would suggest that we rewrite these to say to the board that we believe that this is an important issue, that we maintain the integrity of the promise throughout all the elements, and that we that the board look into consider the possibility of a policy to ensure that equal treatment occurs in the future. There's legal question that they'll have to answer, as well as the very things that Farhad has been talking about, being the purview of the board at that time and its annual requirements to provide a balanced budget.
Mr. Chair, just for my own clarification, we're talking about item 2, correctly?
No, I think we're still
still on
talking
number
about
one.
item
Okay.
1, but
Comment on
item two fits the same
Yeah.
kind of bill. Chris?
Yeah, I was clarifying. My comment was on item 1, but it applies to 2 as well.
Yeah, okay. Patricia and then Mel.
Yeah, my hand was raised to talk about something a little bit different, so we can circle back to me. But in the meantime, can we scroll down on this document? I'm having a little bit of trouble following this conversation, and yeah, I can't see all. Okay, thank you. Is that everything that is relevant to what we're discussing right now? No. Okay. I still can't see all of it.
Not quite. How much further down does 2 go, Crystal?
Ooh. Great.
We go.
There's only 2, right? Okay, cool. Thank you. But yeah, we can circle back to me in a sec if that's all right.
Okay, we'll do that. Next is Mel.
I would agree with Chris, but I'm more concerned of number 2. And therefore, both questions we ought to have presented to our bond counsel if we can before the next meeting. 1, I see how it would be implemented. 2, I have concerns how you do that. So if we would submit them to bond counsel, we can have an answer.
Okay. Again, I suggest that we include those and make a recommendation to the board, if that's what we elect to do as a group, to seek that counsel and consider it.
Just as a reminder, and the side-by-side indicates that. So if there's any significant changes to the plan, it requires voter approval.
Yeah. Yeah, so significant changes. I think we've got a history of the question of what's significant and what isn't. We can go to any number of named projects from RTA1 that have struggled with that, from Broadway to First Avenue, I guess.
So if I understand it correct, the item 2, if I understand that correctly, it says after 10 years, review and change the plan. And the response to that is that, yes, we can do that, but we got to take it back to the voters.
Yeah.
Unless they're not significant, right?
Unless they're not significant.
Because
I believe that, so let's go back to the intent of this language. The intent is to make significant changes, I believe.
Okay.
I agree with that.
So basically, this is fine language.
That's fine as long as you take it back to the voters, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so essentially this one, I think, would be clarified to say that at the 10-year plan to be considered whether there are significant changes that should be taken back to the voters. All right, Arlen.
Yeah, just a comment relative to what Chris said, and then what Farhad had said regarding number 1. Number 2, yeah, of course. Let me hit number 2 first. The important part of that is that last sentence. The most important part, I think, is that last sentence, and talking about the review and community input process. And if it's going to go back to the voters, then of course that will hope happen. And that's the prioritization we were looking for. In number 1, what we were getting at is what Farhad said is, if we get more money, then we thought we had. It's the board's decision as to how that money should be spent. Okay, well, the budget isn't going to indicate that there's more money. This is more money above and beyond an annual budget, perhaps, and maybe wouldn't be known until later on in the 20-year period if we're suddenly having a lot more revenue. And so the point is that if that circumstances occur, it's the intent that it not all be spent in some pet project somewhere, but it be divided similarly, allocated according to the percentages for each of the categories that we have in the plan. So it should be relatively proportional. So that's all it's doing. And I'm sure that there is a way that smart lawyers can figure out how to make that work within the process.
It's an interesting question, though, because we're naming projects, and I think we've talked about having a reserve list that we provide to the board, but it doesn't appear to me that it's even feasible to include that in any ballot language, and nor do I think it's even a good idea necessarily. And so the question becomes, can you do more corridor projects having not named them, should you end up with a windfall?
Again, my understanding of the statute is that you can spend more dollars on elements of the projects. So you may be able to enhance a named project, but you may not do a brand new unnamed project. Or you can enhance those named projects if you have additional revenue.
Yeah, and again, without going back to the voters to modify the plan, right? Okay.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Patricia, are you
Sure.
for sure?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. One is a question about the word significant in significant changes, and if that's like well defined somewhere, or if we could reach consensus about what that means and get that in writing. And then just wanted to throw support behind sending things back to the community when changes, inevitably probably will need to be made, just because a lot of change can happen in terms of like population and demographics in 10 years and priorities. So just wanted to voice that. And then my other question was about the vote that we're going to take next meeting and what exactly that's going to look like. Like, is it rank choice? Like, are we somehow going to up down vote on several different proposals that don't have consensus? Or I would love to kind of walk through that process and make sure we all know what we're getting into.
Okay, the term significant is a legal term that is part of the Arizona revised statutes that govern this, as I recall. And Farhad has explained it to us. Maybe he can give us the Reader's Digest of what significant is considered to be.
Sure. So for the purpose of this discussion, again, from making sure that the public understands, are they getting what is promised in the ballot? So our definition of significant changes are things that are not anything close to what's on the ballot. So that's rule number one. Rule number two, you can make adjustments and come back with good justification on why you're making those adjustments, and then be able to analyze and determine that they are not significantly different than what the intent of the original plan was. So Broadway was a good example of that exercise. We went through extensive exercise, and the board ultimately decided that the changes to Broadway were not significant. So it has to be on a case-by-case basis. It has to be analyzed. There is a conversation to take place with the public before the board makes a decision if something is significant or not.
Thank you. And to attempt to answer your question, I had not considered ranked choice voting, but as I've just been thinking about it, it sounds actually like possibly a really good idea, at least for us to get to kind of whether there is a real consensus. I think if we use something like that, you know, whatever turned out to be the most popular, and perhaps the second could be, put up, together, kind of in that process to, allow us to try to, zero in on the most popular, and the most supportable, proposal. But I'm open to, suggestions. I at least want to find out and give everyone a chance to, express, what their preference is. And, to that end, I could imagine, looking either at a ranked choice type of a process, or, identifying, you know, the two of the projects, or two of the proposals, and, looking to see if either achieved a, consensus, and if not, then moving on to, perhaps an alternative, or you know, middle ground type of a proposal. Stunned silence. Okay, go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, I want to go back to this for just a second, and I want to try to bring a little more reality to this, I guess is what I'm going to
Number
say.
two, are you talking about
Is-
number two?
Well, number two, the alternative, what happens if we have more money at the end than we think we have?
Or less?
Or less. Well, less we're gonna have to deal with, more like we're dealing with right now, because you're thinking about this. But the reality that our experience at doing this kind of thing at the city of Tucson has been, you're not comfortable making these decisions until year 22. Okay? You're going to be looking at year 22 or year 23 when you have certain numbers on every listed project. And the reality, if the law stays the same, you're going to have the complication that you're going to have the 2065 plan already in place when you decide you have this extra money. So I think it's great to spell out that it should be used for a reserve list, et cetera. The odds are those projects from the reserve list are all going to be in the 2065 plan, or we were going to have decided not to do it. And so I think there's some reality that needs to be here with this. You know, I think it's great to say that it should be used, you know, in some way here, but the specific projects I think are going to be, the world's going to be different by that time. And I think we need to keep that in mind in the language.
I think you could ask Carmine, what the chances of passing a similar type of, policy through his board of supervisors might be, you know, attempting to tie future boards' hands, and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
regardless of where it came from. For instance, on bond issues, ever seen anything similar to that? This, you know, proposed, policy, come forward in bond issues?
Tom, as a rule of thumb, the ability to limit actions of future boards is,
Yeah. But I can tell you, as somebody who's sitting, we've got the Proposition 101 money we collected, that we quit collecting about 15 months ago. We know that there's extra money, but we got projects out there that are still open. And until we get those projects done, we ain't gonna spend any of that money. And so, you know, and I mean, it's only logic, you know, and so we need to really keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks. Let's move up to number 3. kind of bring number 3 up into the middle of the page there, just so it's a little higher up on the screen I'm looking at anyway. Thanks. So investment in additional public transit capacity should be prioritized. And focusing on high capacity transit projects. I
It's
said
a focus,
before.
it's a focus, not the focus.
Okay. Okay, good. Just say what you think about this, this one.
I think it makes sense. And, you know, there's only one high capacity transit project that's being proposed for this plan. You know, I think it's fine, but I would also be fine with just having the first sentence. But Bruce Wright isn't here, I don't think, still.
Right.
So he might have, you know, I know he has that focus, but we do have a focus on well, there's additional public transit capacity. That's it should be prioritized. I think that's good. The rest I would like to hear from people on this. A focus should be on high capacity transit projects linking major activity centers, including large regional work sites, schools, hospitals, and medical centers, transportation hubs, and entertainment and sports complexes. Although, you know, there is an issue with the transit-oriented development with housing as well, but I don't know. I don't see anything wrong with it. Does anybody else?
Well, we've heard that high capacity transit is less effective, less, you know, monetarily effective than other uses of the transit money. So, you know, in essence, you're asking for something that is probably not recommended typically as either a focus or a high focus.
I would simplify it to investment in additional public transit capacity should be prioritized, including the proposed high capacity transit project presented by the city of Tucson.
Yeah, if I could suggest something here, rather than frame this as a policy, rather just include this in our transmittal to the you know, to the board, saying this plan reflects a you know, a focus on transit and the priorities thereof, and in fact looks you know, looks at high capacity transit and recommends that it be utilized.
So not in this document, but in our transmittal when we're finished work.
Yeah, I think we'll be sending a letter and it'll include you know, something about policies that we think the board should consider. But I think we can also say herewith is the plan that we're recommending, and you'll note that it has a high priority or shows a focus on investing in additional public transportation, public transit capacity. Anybody want to jump in on that? I see Jamie and then Arlen.
Hey, Tom, this is Jamie. So I think all these could be under that heading of considerations. In my world, I think we have something going on here called mission creep, and we're exceeding our authority. I mean, our task originally was make recommendations to the RTA board, and these are simply recommendations. I don't think we can mandate these policy statements need to be put in the election pamphlet or guide or whatever. I think we really need to kind of reset here and say these are considerations for future board guidance. I think it's a little bit demeaning for us to demand some of these things from the RTA board. They're elected officials. duly elected, and they have a responsibility to their constituents. Our 30-member board should not, and cannot exceed the authority of those elected officials. So I think all these should kind of be part of our transmitter level that says, hey, when things like this comes up, consider these items when making these tough decisions instead of doing it 100% in the dark. My 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I would fully agree with that. And it's actually the way we've framed this in our past discussions as well. We're not telling the board that here's a policy we want you to enact. We're telling them this is something that we think is important, and we recommend that you find a way to continue that, since it was if you accept our draft plan, recognize that it's a part of what makes the plan, and do with it as is appropriate. Did you have something, Diane?
I think this makes sense in this context, but if this is our priority as a citizens advisory committee, citizens spoken on behalf of other citizens to say the public transit is for the greater good, is that reflected in the numbers that we're talking about in this plan? And also, is there any way to move this up? I'm not sure. I can't see 1 and 2, but where would this fit in if this is a priority of this group?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be something for people to consider. Are any of them more important than the others? And are some of them worthy of even continuing beyond simply pointing out that they're reflected in the plan that we've created? Maybe Arlen has an idea about that.
Thanks. I assume that was a cue.
Yes, it was. You're on.
Thanks. And basically the statement, with or without high capacity, as the word is, planning 101. And I got on this committee. I asked to be on the committee because I wanted to make a better tie between land use and transportation. And so far I've failed miserably at that attempt. We look at transportation almost in a vacuum, and we're not focusing on land use. And I recognize that it's not the RTA's responsibility to focus on land use, but transportation begets land use begets transportation needs, and they work symbiotically. It's just we do not treat them that way in this region and in most regions of the country. So by whether this is a policy statement or whether it's how you say it, is to put it in the background. The transit dollars in this plan, unlike the specific projects, are generalized. They're not identified to any specific location. And so from that perspective, unless we start moving toward where we're connecting activity centers, transit hubs, higher density residential, and all of these are transit hubs and draws, then we're just running a bunch of buses down streets to get from someplace to someplace, not increasing our passenger usage. And this is really important. So I need it to be in the concept somewhere. And if it's going to be in an overall statement, then that's fine, but it needs to be somewhere. And then I'd like to also just say, I think we can strike number 4 because it's been decided.
Yeah,
They'll do it if they want to.
Just about to say that. You make a great point about the land use link, and perhaps strengthening this item number 3, or highlighting it or something like that is appropriate. Because we've had this conversation before. We can, the concept or the theory of build it and they will come is sometimes accurate, but building it without a foundation for that growth is not necessarily going to return what we hope. So the foundation of the land use and other local policies are critical, obviously, to that. Dale?
I'm gonna make it short and sweet since it's 5:15 or 5:25. I agree with Arlen, what Arlen just said. I think I think putting out the idea high capacity transit is important. Even if there are other alternatives, and the fact that the the sales tax amount at this point, as far as I'm concerned, that's up to the board. They want to change it after they see what the public comments are. I think they know they can change it.
Okay.
So I don't think there's anything for us to add.
Very good.
I just want to clarify what Arlen was saying. Were you saying that this idea should be in here, but not necessarily just about high capacity transit, but about transit projects generally? And trying to link that with land use? Is that what you're saying, Arlen? Or keeping it as high capacity particularly?
Well, I would probably modify it as high capacity and I don't know how I'd put it. I'm tired. And other transit projects or whatever. The point is that both for high capacity and for all transit projects to be most effective, they really need to link people with jobs, people with entertainment, people with sports, people with hospitals, and so on and so forth, and our larger educational institutions. So however that works to say it, that's fine, but it's both really.
Okay,
got it. Yep, thanks.
Bruce's point was high capacity, but I would expand it in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, is your hand just still up, or do you have another comment here?
Nope, I just left it up. Sorry about that.
No problem. I think number 4 without objection will be deleted, and we'll move on to number 5. This one I can read quickly. All named projects within each expenditure category should have an appropriate contingency within the scope of the project budget for cost increases due to factors such as inflation, change orders, or other conditions. I think that's already done. Farhad, could you kind of explain, or maybe Rick would like to explain how these updated cost estimates were compiled?
So we used the latest and greatest tangible information we could, and then recognized where the limits of the unknowns were involved or the complexities that were difficult to estimate. So for everything we said, well, we're going to put an allocation to it. And if we have a low degree of comfort, then we're going to put a contingency to cover the unknown, the aspects we just don't have an understanding at this point in time on. So that's filtered throughout every single project, varying amounts. So we didn't use one size fits all. Every project that had different nuances, wrinkles, complexities were adjusted, discussed, and reflected that accordingly throughout every aspect of it. So you've got contingencies built into every project as such necessary to ensure that that's being thought of.
I think originally this was submitted in response to kind of the ongoing hyperinflation that was affecting projects at the time that we started really diving into this and before we'd received these changes, as well as the stuff you see in items 1 and 2, where there was a fear of coming short again in the estimating. So
we took one extra step in there, and this is partly what added the extra time in there, was to ensure that our methodology for delivery, we got into the weeds with the jurisdictions on this to say, how do you intend to build this? Not how could it be done? What would the end condition look like? But you're going to go about delivering in a certain way and have we analyze those conditions, risks, elements, so that how you want to build it is how we estimate it.
So would one of those considerations be timing? Did you get far enough to say we can't get a project out because of the amount of prep work necessary for at least 8 years, and therefore, there's more unknowns than there would be for something that's shovel ready?
No, we didn't take into account the current timing for implementation, but we took into account the complexities for the duration of implementation. So a project with major railroad implications, cultural activities, lengthy right-of-way acquisition that's going to stretch out over time, we did reflect that. Projects that are longer in terms of distance. 2-mile jobs go shorter, quicker, and easier than 8-mile jobs. We took that into account as well. So we built in the anticipated duration and what that would incorporate, but not the when. That answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think, if we're at all, considering the reduction of the contingencies that were part of the TMC framework, we would have to be kind of pinning that on the fact that we have good cost estimates now. I mean, in a way, if you want to say get rid of the contingencies, you better be able to say they're fully built in or they're robustly included in the cost estimates that we have.
I'll speak up now because that's kind of that's a mixed emotions, and I can understand the trap on that.
Sure.
The estimates we did are a reflection of what we could calculate, estimate, and allocate. It is not a guarantee of 15 years from now that if you pay me $83 million, I'll give you a road. We looked at stuff, and if we could quantify it, calculate it, measure it, we did so. We used contingency for those things that we didn't know. As Farhad described, the contingencies being carried in there is for things outside of that project purview, carryover, buffer, things like that that wouldn't normally be built into the project. So contingency isn't a safety net. Farhad's description of the contingency maybe gives you a better description of a safety net. So we haven't made up and doubled up. They're different purposes, different elements, and different aspects of it. So I treat that with, as Farhad's emphasized, as the board has said, lesson learned, we're not that great. We're trying to be, we recognize it, but there are factors outside of our control that are still out there. We're opening projects now that we absolutely knew 6 weeks ago what they would cost, and we're off by about 25%. There's a reality to that we've tried to accommodate, we've tried to account for.
Yeah. And I guess I would also point out to those of you who were around in 2005 and 6 that kind of in order to get some more projects into the plan, some of the contingencies were cut back. And that cost estimating was only a compounding error or a compounding problem that the future boards had to deal with, as well as, not using a pessimistic projection to begin with. So, all right, is there an objection to eliminating this item?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, even if it's redundant, should we leave it in or I don't,
I'm just asking it,
yeah. I don't know.
not suggesting it necessarily.
Just have a question.
Tom,
Yeah, go ahead, Arlen, and then Diane.
yeah, just real quick, I would say, number one, what Tom said and what Rick said in general. But I want you to know, I wrote this particular thing, drafted the main part of it, because while the assumption is that you would have such a contingency in each project, looking at that larger scale, and I realize that they're not the same thing, but that larger scale, $100 million in overall contingencies, if you wanted to make sure that you could reduce that in some amount, then you needed to have as accurate or as good as projections as you could for contingencies for every individual project. And so that was the intent. I still think it's a good idea to have it in there. It will, of course, be in there naturally. And I'm happy to see that Rick and others did excellent work in trying to ensure that the contingencies for each project were covered to the extent maximally possible to know.
Good. Thank you, Arlen. Diane.
Arlen just made my point much more articulately than I could have. Thank you, Arlen.
Yeah, that's why I'm not jumping in right now. All right, let's go on to number 6. All named roadway projects that add capacity within a specific jurisdiction for future growth should include a defined local match. That's essentially saying no capacity unless the jurisdiction is paying for it or
Participating.
contributing it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very specific for future growth as opposed to taking care of current problems that are, I think that's what that's supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm concerned, a little bit concerned about it, knowing how roadway projects are designed. The capacity that's typically designed for is a future capacity, right? Now, assuming some amount of growth has contributed to congestion that exists, what improvements should be done to help that congestion? And we know that the congestion will perhaps recur at some point, but there's design parameters that are put into place to say, look at what we anticipate the traffic to be in 20 years and make sure that we're trying to provide a roadway that has at least that kind of life to it.
I wanted to ask Carmine, just for an example, is that western section of Drexel looking at future growth that the board is, they've got new subdivisions up there, or is it already congested and because of past growth up to this point?
So it's already congested. So when you look at county projects, they're all dealing with overcapacity or nearing overcapacity situation. Life of this plan, things will only worsen. So we have, one new segment, and that's the far west end of Irvington, and that's road stops to connect out into Ajo Way. But even there, you've got existing development that's surrounding that road corridor.
So my take on that was that if you already have other land use plans and you have a resolution for impact fee, identify those projects and provide the impact fee, which is exactly what we did back in 2006. If a community does not have an impact fee already, that means they haven't gone to that extent to identify those future uses.
That mean this is keep it in?
They've already done that. If you look at the list, everybody that already has an impact fee associated to a named project have already identified that, and it's on the list. It's shown as non-RTA contribution.
All right.
Right.
Take it out.
Take it out. Is that what you're saying? Are we saying take it out?
They've already done it.
Yeah, it's
Already.
Okay.
Either done or not gonna get.
Yeah, it's done. Similar to item 5, it's already done.
right. And
We're reading in.
the final one we have to do is the draft plan will be submitted to the public for comment. In response, the CAC should be given the opportunity to review and consider those comments and to recommend changes and modifications in the plan prior to its final approval by the RTA board and its referral to the voters. My understanding from the conversations at the board are that they are reserving that review right for themselves and not necessarily committed to or believing that there perhaps is a need to come back to the CAC after that round of public input is acquired. I might ask Farhad if that's an accurate understanding.
Yeah, again, if you recall, Mr. Chair, the task was to develop a plan and forward the plan to the board, and the board obviously will take hopefully the next 12 months to get extensive feedback from the community, and they have the authority to make adjustments based on that feedback. So that is my understanding as well. Yes.
Yeah, I would suggest perhaps rewording of this to simply let the board know that we remain committed to this process, and anything that they might need from us going forward, we're more than willing to assist.
I think the wording is fine. I mean, they might say no, and they might not have plan, but there was a lot of discussion that we would like to, and that's all that's saying right now is that, consider giving us the opportunity to, don't fire us yet, unless you're sick of us. I mean, I think it's good to suggest that to them. And if you think it should be reworded, come up with something, but it was specifically to be reviewing them as a CAC and not as individuals.
Yeah, I guess I would change the wording to something like the CAC would welcome the opportunity to review and consider those comments.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. I don't know who that is.
Harlan.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking at what we wrote, and I think it's still valid as a normal public process. You would want your advisory committee to at least have the opportunity to review whatever the comments are and look at changes in the plan. And then I don't know whether it would be prior to its final approval, but to make suggestions based on that and include that in the process. Because if you look on the right side of the page, bullet point number 3, that beyond the development of the plan, the CAC's involvement would be to support the RTA in educating the public about the contents of the draft plan. It will no longer be the CAC's plan. It will be the RTA's plan without going back to the CAC. And I will just dare say that the amount of participation you're going to get from a CAC that in general, and there will be exceptions to this, but who has not reviewed beyond whatever it was that they supported to the RTA in the first place, it's going to be a very tough fight. And I will tell you that plans, including one that I participated in the town of Oro Valley years ago, a general plan, failed at the polls, in part because it never went back to the committee that was in charge, something like the CAC, the Citizens Committee, and that way the citizens committee took a powder and the plan failed. So I caution that item number 3, it may be technically correct the way it is not a, how do I say this, is not a solution for success. And I'll just leave it at that. So.
Okay, point taken. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Brian Keeley.
Yes, go ahead, Brian, you're next.
Sorry, sir. I have a hard stop I'm coming up on. I have another engagement to get to. If I leave, will it affect your quorum?
Okay.
The quorum's almost,
How's that quorum?
yeah, we're right at 15. So if anybody leaves, we're done.
All right, Abby, your comment?
I had a question. I was looking at policy item number 6, which to me seems sensible, and Farhad said it had already been taken out, but I missed in what context it had already been removed.
Say again?
Number 6. Sorry, I had my hand up since then, but we moved on. I like that policy piece. Farhad said it's already been removed, and I missed the reasoning and when that happened.
Because you said it was done already, that I was suggesting we keep it in, just even if it's redundant.
Oh, and okay, so Farhad is saying it already exists somewhere in the plan. Can somebody just clarify that for me?
Talk about the matching the number 6 with.
Sure. If you look at the framework, every project has 3 columns. One is the RTA portion. The second one is the non-RTA portion. And then there's the total cost for the project. All those communities that have an impact fee have already identified how much impact fee they are bringing to the table for those specific projects. So the dollar amounts you see on those projects are mostly impact fee amounts, other than the State Route 210 projects or the ADOT projects.
So, and this specifically is written to apply to new projects that are providing, that are not responding to existing capacity needs.
Correct. So again,
rather providing future.
Each community that has an impact ordinance, they've already identified those projects, so they're named projects, and they determine those are for future needs. Therefore, the impact fee applies to those projects.
Got it. Okay, Brian, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a comment also, or did you just leave?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm still here. I switched over to my mobile device so that we can continue this as I'm on my way to the next venue. I don't want you to lose your quorum.
Oh, thanks. Did you have any other comments?
No, that was it.
Okay. Looks like I have just one more comment here. That's from Chris.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will be quick. As it relates to 6, Abby's question is good because I think, as Farhad pointed out, there are some local jurisdictions that have not included a local match, and 6 speaks to adding capacity. And as a policy suggestion to the board, it's probably a good idea to include that as a suggestion, that there be a match associated with additional capacity to encourage those local jurisdictions to commit local resources to capacity projects. So I think I'm with Carolyn that statement as a policy statement from the CAC as a suggestion to the board is a good one.
Okay, thank you. Right. I don't see any other comments, and we've reached the end of the proposed policies. Might ask if anyone has developed any new policies that they think we haven't talked about. Speak now or forever hold your peace, or at least till next month. All right, just a reminder, our next meeting, we will be looking at the wordsmith versions of these policies with the up or down vote for each of them. And then we'll, yeah, she's still listening. And then we'll also be voting on our alternatives. So please carefully examine those different proposals and come prepared to help us reach a consensus to give to the board. And now with everyone walking out of the room, and thank you, Brian, for giving us an extra couple minutes. Appreciate keeping the quorum. So we're now adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
That meeting's in 2 weeks, Mr. Chair.
What's that?
The meeting is in 2 weeks, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
December.
11 o'clock on December the 5th,
Okay, thank you.
if that's Monday.